Hello and good morning. As you can tell by the comments, Topper is stuck down under in an underground kangaroo wrestling ring, and I do believe that Henry is riding in on his llama to save him. So it's just me, except I do have some great backup here. Two of my favorite people. We have the Dr. Zoidberg himself, Dean, and we have Amanda. So come on in and say hi, everyone. How are you guys
Hello.
today?
I'm good.
Yeah. Always happy to be your silver medal, Josh.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Holding my heart first off. So, before we started the countdown, Dean pointed out that Amanda has an under counter microwave, which at
Yes.
first I thought was really cool, but it actually seems really inconvenient.
Yes.
How
It's an
many things?
apartment though, so it's small. Like it's just easier for counter space. How's that?
I mean, that's fine, but like just putting things in there, like I feel that if you're putting like, TV dinners or things like leftovers, it's
I
easier to
don't
grab
eat
them
TV
top
dinners,
down.
Josh.
That's fine.
My
Okay,
microwave does
you
not
make
get used very often.
Can
I
we
don't even
also
know.
talk about the little baby oven there? I love it.
It's the easy
I have
bake
a real
oven.
size kitchen, not a Polly Pocket kitchen in the other house. This is just the apartment in Toronto.
But under
Fair.
the counter means look at all that like seriously though, look at all the space above the cooktop. Like that's the
Get
trade-off.
out of my apartment.
I love it.
It's too late.
If I could figure out how to.
Can we
to
talk
burn back-
about the array of soaps that Amanda has?
Do you? Do you guys have what is it? Is it Bath and Body Works in Canada?
No. But if you want to really talk about something, let's go with this.
Boxes.
It's a lot of boxes.
Many boxes.
Can you see your bag milk?
I mean, I have bag milk. Shut up.
where are the Timbits?
There's no
and the
Timbits
coffee
here.
crunch. The coffee crunch. That's an amazing.
It is a really good
bar.
chocolate bar. Don't you dare talk any smack about it. It's the best
No,
chocolate
I
bar.
love it. That might be the best Canadian candy there is, honestly. But someone wants to see my cat. Well, here you go. This is Millie. The other one probably will come up here at some point. Yeah. All right. Well, anything we want to comment on Dean's background? We talked about my background and Amanda's. What do we got in Dean's background? We got hats. We got stickers for days. We got posters. We got an aquarium. We got action figures. I mean, Dean's background's pretty legit. There's not much we can kind of dive further into.
The camera has to stay locked because if I pan over slightly, it's a disaster.
Like we can comment on all the stuff in my background, but we can't see the disaster in yours. Got it.
Yes, correct.
Poor Tara.
Well, we're not roasting the kitchen. Like she probably has a little more counter space than mine does. My kitchen is like it's set up so poorly. Like the island, I wish I could just. It's so dumb. I like my house except for the backyard and the kitchen, and like. I love cooking, so having a good kitchen is like imperative. My old house had an amazing kitchen, and I miss it almost every day. So,
the house in Niagara has a nice kitchen. I should do a live from there one day. You want to have a whole commentary
kitchen,
about that?
I feel like we're watching House Hunters International, where it's like Amanda is an artisanal mushroom farmer whose budget is $70 million a year. She's currently looking for an upgrade in downtown Toronto.
Oh boy, 70 million would probably do it though. It's expensive here.
All right. Well,
I should have wore a baseball cap to match everybody.
I mean, I can go have.
No. I'm just teasing.
Well, you do wear quite a few hats. So, all right. Before we get into the stories, Dean, if somebody's just tuning in and they don't know who you are, give yourself the 30-second intro.
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry. My name's Dean, perhaps better known to many of you as Dr. Zoidberg. I have been an MSP service and operations manager for the better part of 2 decades, and then I became a soulless husk of a human and switched over to the vendor side of the industry, where I make life miserable for MSPs now. And I think I am up to now 78 different channel hats, either from vendors or MSPs or whatever. So send me your hats.
All right, Amanda,
My
your
turn.
turn. Yep.
So yes, thank you. Somebody who changed all the things on my whatever, because it just had my one role. Amanda LaChapelle. I'm also, I don't want to say, I'm not a former MSP. I'm still an MSP. I still own an MSP, I co-own an MSP. Which means that I still have Teams messages that I get at all hours of whatever. But I just started a new role as MSP field strategist at Authic. Super involved in community in general, just like talking. So anybody who lets me be on a stage or in front of a camera to do so sounds great to me. And yes, that it should also be on there too. Correct. I do have some pretty amazing pins. I may or may not have a bag somewhere here right now. So, your sasshole pin.
Yeah, it won't focus, but this is from Amanda. It's a sasshole.
So you actually got one of the expensive one, Deans. I'm not going to differentiate exactly all of them, but the one that you got is actually by an Australian creator. Her name is Jubbly Umph, and I highly recommend her pins. They're very good quality, but they have the most interesting sayings on them, and I've given out a few of them. The sparkly, neuro spicy ones come from there too.
I have a couple of those, but they're upstairs on our pin board, so I can't. I do have some of Amanda's amazing pins as well. But all right, well, I think we have some stories to dive into this week, so let's just get into them. This first one here, I am so very happy that this was posted, and this actually doesn't come from any of the MSP, the sysadmin. This comes from the Reddit engineering subreddit, which I didn't know was a thing, but it's basically a subreddit for internal people at Reddit to talk about internal tech and engineering things. And they have an amazing post that all MSPs need to read, that all companies should read, about maturing their GRC and their security alignment. So this is a long post. I'm not going to go through it. We can scroll down through it. But basically, they go through the steps of, hey, before we had anything with our GRC, we basically we had all of these crazy things that didn't really align to anything. They've always had, they claim privacy and security baked into the culture. The formal security controls had room for improvement because, again, things existed, but they weren't really aligned. There was manual errors. There was, all of these weird things going in. So they basically said our security was like baking a cake and we didn't have a recipe. So we were eyeballing ingredients. Over time, they created a control framework. They decided on some ones to follow. They talk you through the process of what that looked like. They actually combined 4 controls into some common controls that worked for them, and they matured. So they have, hey, there's an informal to a playbook is defined, but it's repeatable, but maybe I'll forget. And then they automate it with guardrails, and now it's fully automated. So they show that timeline of it and what the future looks like. So all of that being said, amazing post, great example. I'm going to go to you guys on why, I said that companies should read this, but why? Can you expand on why they should read this, or if they should read it? Maybe I'm wrong.
You probably want them to read it from the fact that GRC is not usually very sexy, and like they're making it the nerd version of sexy, if that makes sense. I think, though, the better lesson there is how you marry automation structures, whatever it is, with documentation, so that you can remove some of the chances for not doing something or not engaging in the correct way. It's very much a system that we approach with our PSA when we're doing stuff like what needs to be in Hoodoo, what needs to just be something you have to do as part of a ticket. And oh god, Dean, if you're going to post stuff like that while I can see it, that's a problem. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think that's the more important lesson. Like they use this particular approach, but I think for this one specific item, but if you apply that across your entire MSP or any business, really, it's going to be the best adoption, in my opinion. That's the lesson I like.
Dean, how about you?
Oh, this is adulting. And and I mean this seriously, like I'm an ops guy and I look at something like this and my eyes roll back in my head and I just sort of go, I hope someone in our organization cares. And I think that's really common. That is really the big problem, especially around like risk. And if you're an MSP and you're watching this, our entire business model is risk balance and mitigation for a recurring price. And so just anything that we're doing to make it a little bit easier to connect everything back together and sort of allow someone, hopefully someone in the organization, like a Josh, to be like, ooh, this is important. We need that. Because I don't care. I just sort of assume that everybody's going to be on the up and up and trust each other. And what do we need any of this for? And obviously, that's a terrible, terrible take to have. So people like me, unfortunately, are in charge in a lot of places, which is really scary.
Let's go back to the cake. Let's go back to the cake analogy. So, we have we're a cake shop, but we don't. I mean, maybe we don't sell the cake. We make our cake internally, right? And I'm able to produce a cake, right? You don't know that I'm eyeballing ingredients and measuring it and all of this stuff. And what I produce is it's a cake, right? So, at what point do you come in and you say, okay, well, yes, you can make a cake, but then you produce this amazing one with a recipe with, crazy frosting and all of that. Like, what is the kind of the point to go from, well, if we can make a cake, why does it need to be like this? What's kind of that turning point?
Well, like a really good example, let's say Amanda and I both own that bakery together. And normally we sort of like generally follow the same recipe where we use some eggs. And one day we can't get eggs and I still need to make a cake. So I substitute something else for the eggs. And I don't tell anybody. I don't tell Amanda. I don't tell the customer. I don't tell anyone. The cake comes out and it's different. Whether it's good or bad, it's different. That's a problem. And it's a problem operationally. It's a problem as a business because now we've drifted from our de facto cake standard, even if it wasn't established. And that opens us up for risk. What if that opens us up for, allergies, food safety, brand consistency, taste? I mean, what if it's probably going to be gross? So like all of that stuff in your cake analogy is why you need to define how you're going to, even something as arbitrary as just making the cake, how you're going to make it, why you're going to make it, what we're being protected by following that recipe, what liability we're accepting by following that recipe. And all of that is incredibly boring and no fun until you actually need it. Because what's more fun to just mess around in the kitchen and make stuff and have fun. And this is delicious. What do you think of this? Like that's what's fun. That's what engineers want to do. We want to tinker with stuff. But unfortunately, we can't when we're in that professional setting. And having all of this defined with a standard, with a framework is super important because of people like me. I am the problem. I don't care. I don't care about the standard. I just want to do whatever. So we need a framework.
The opposite.
Yeah.
I care about the standard.
Amanda's
I need there to be standard.
Amanda's coming in with like the multi-tiered cake, meticulously piped frosting, sugar work decorations, and then Dean's looking at his cake, and I'm like,
no, actually, I think that's not it. I think for me, it's not about the craziness of the cake and whatever. It's that I'm more likely to publish the ingredients. I'm more likely to make it really clear what's in the cake so that anybody who's enjoying it is going to be able to know if there's any allergy issues or if they're going to have, a reaction to something just because of intolerance, whatever the case may be. I like having that process. I like making it clear because then when we're talking about repeatable, bring in a new technician, bring in a new client, all of those things, it becomes infinitely easier to do that and easier on my technicians, easier for the people experiencing the process when all of those steps are clear, right? It's not to say that you can't have that creativity. You need that in some areas, but like when it comes to process, I think I'm always going to be a lover of that. Like our documentation system has a process behind it. Not everybody can just throw things in there the way they want to. Because when we did that, we ended up with 11 documents on how to upgrade to Windows 10 or whatever it was. And so like, I don't want that either because then you create noise and the noise means that people can't hear. They can't hear.
Well, let's okay. I love that we started this by like talking about Amanda's kitchen, and now we're just stuck in the kitchen. So we're gonna stay in the kitchen. Our next story
Oh boy.
um, is how do you tell a user the problem isn't technical as them? So we're gonna stay in the kitchen. We're not gonna get into tech. Amanda has an amazing published cake recipe, and she has, like, hey, you want to make the cake? Here's
Tell
the
them yes.
recipe. And the end user finds Amanda's recipe online and then substitutes the eggs for, I don't know, chicken, something ridiculous. And then they complain to Amanda saying, hey, what the hell? My cake is terrible. Amanda, how do you tell the user that there's nothing wrong with their tech, but you can't do what they're doing?
Can I be honest? I've actually run into this problem quite a few times in the MSP, and quite often we don't tell the user. We tell the user's boss. We've had. I'm gonna try not to do anything that would identify anybody. We had a client where one of their users thought they were very adept at technology. And at one point during one of the phone calls, even told one of my technicians that they could hack us, but also could not figure out why their VoIP phone system wasn't working, and was linking it back somehow to their router, and it actually had nothing to do with that. It was a software issue specifically. In any case, it was like, I think, a 15-minute phone call between my technician and them where they couldn't even figure out what the problem was. The person was talking in circles, and I literally sent the recording of the phone call to them to go, we don't know what to do with this. Like, realistically, most of the time we try to make things work, but we need to be honest with you. There seems to be a gap here. And this is not something that we know how to deal with. This is a personnel issue at this point, and we need to make you aware of it. And that's really the line you have to look at. Like, is the person being patient when they don't understand, or are they starting to lose their temper? Then you don't know how they're going to go off and say whatever they want to say. And I feel like getting ahead of that by going, not tattletaling, but going to the client and saying, how would you like us to deal with this? Because that is their employee, right? And you kind of have to mirror whatever their approach is. Some places are more accepting, and some places are like, they're an idiot, don't talk to them anymore, right? Like, you take your cue from that. That's my opinion.
So, Dean, what are you telling the customer they're an idiot for replacing the eggs, or how are you handling it?
Oh, what a so if I go purely into service manager mode, then yes, obviously the end user is a moron. 100% of problems that are generated because of end user stupidity. The customer is always wrong. End of story. Ticket closed. And the sad truth is, actually, not joking, like that's actually true most of the time. We have reached a state with the level of most production technology where it's very reliable, and outside of human intervention or interaction or environmental, unpredictability, computers don't break. They generally do exactly what they're supposed to do over and over again. It's people, we're the problem. And so that's the case a lot. And you have to, part of being in support, and I think this is what's very different from being a system admin or network engineer, or like any of the other titles we use for, the non-front side of it. Part of support is understanding that the person you're talking to probably put themselves in this situation, and they may or may not even be willing to understand or ever understand their hand or responsibility in that. And we have to try to help educate them and guide them to not repeating their behavior without insulting them, without getting them in trouble, in their role where they work, and really without ever making them feel stupid. And that is incredibly hard to do. I've done that wrong many times. If you're an MSP and you're watching this, don't do that. Don't tell your end users they're stupid, or go tell their boss that, all of your problems are caused by your sysadmin, Josh. Because a company's probably going to take the side of its own employees, even in the face of empirical data. So it's very nuanced. And sometimes you just got to swallow that and put a smile on and move forward.
I think
would
it's
agree it's
human.
nuanced though, but I still think that depends on your approach. Like when we went to them, we didn't say your employee's stupid. We were like, there's an issue. We're not sure how to fix it. How would you like us to approach it? And then he listened to this phone call and like give you an idea of what we're dealing with. And so like it is nuanced. I think it's really dependent on your relationship. Now we had a really great relationship with that client. Had it been someone else, you're right, we probably would have sucked it up.
Well, the other side though is how you'd approach it, because it's human nature. If you start, being confrontational or basically blaming them, or outright, saying, well, it's because you're doing it wrong, well, of course they're going to get defensive and not work with you, right? Like, I prefer the approach of, like kind of the us versus them, like, hey, I struggled with this too, whatever, blaming faceless Microsoft or whatever you want to do, but just kind of getting on their side and aligning to a common enemy, and then working them through and educating them on like, hey, this is how it should be done. And maybe even, again, leading by education of showing them documentation, KB. There does come a point where you do have to escalate it at some point. But I think that initial is really just kind of, not confrontational and not calling them out on it, but instead, hey, I'm going to, help you, guide you, and educate you through this. And I think that that's where your service skills and your soft skills are going to matter quite a bit more than your tech skills.
One of the most powerful things, if you're just on the help desk and you're hearing this, one of the most powerful things you can start to learn to do to manifest what Josh just said is get a little bit better at figuring out, when you're triaging a ticket, what the user's intended outcome was. Not the statement of the problem, not what they're telling you. What were they actually trying to do? Because oftentimes, if you can get really good at getting your end users to tell you what they were trying to do, or where they were trying to end up, you can gently provide workarounds, suggestions, or tips framed around that outcome, which can help somebody kind of lead themselves to water. That horse can lead itself there. Can kind of go, oh, and that is almost never presented acrimoniously. So.
All right, well, let's go ahead and keep on going to the next story here. I don't know. Well, we'll find a way to spin this back to the kitchen, but this poster wants to know if this is a normal MSP experience. He started working for the MSP back in January. He's worked in IT for a while, but this is his first step into the world of the MSPs. He makes $40K a year, overtime exempt. Imagine that's the norm for most positions I'm applying for, but he hasn't worked less than 45 hours a week since starting. The other issue is that no one knows anything. I'm an installer, help desk, configuration / do everything employee. I don't work with any one client enough to know anything about them, generally speaking, but no one else in the company either does a lot of things. I frequently go to sites to replace computers. I'll find out the client needs this particularly weird piece of software installed, and there won't be any documentation on our end on how to install it. I ask around, I get passed employee to employee on our end until I either get nothing or at best a location where an installer might be found, but I'm usually on my own trying to figure out how the software actually works. That's just an example, but there's lots of cases where I'm trying to figure this out on the fly. I get the sense we have too many small clients, but it wouldn't surprise me that it's the norm for MSPs because of the business model. If this is the norm, well, I applaud all of you for keeping on top of this. It's not for me, and I don't think I'm going to try to look for other MSP jobs. So, what would you tell this person?
I have a lot to say, but I'm going to let Dean go first.
I was going to say, just factually, if you're in the US or Canada, I can't think of, this is not legal advice, but I can't think of any state where $40,000 a year is de facto overtime exempt. Different states have different rules, but also bear in mind that even if that was a salary threshold, there are almost always other stipulations for being OT exempt. So that's probably not accurate. And that's the first problem here. Most employee posts I see on Reddit, full picture of kind of the situation they're in. So whoever this person is, I would just start with that part of your post alone raises an eyebrow that maybe somebody misled you at some point previously, and you should find out a little more info about that at your organization. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that Amanda will express better than me. about the rest of this,
Maybe.
but this industry absolutely can be drinking from a fire hose. Probably and hopefully not that bad, but if you don't want to get wet, you probably should not sit in the MSP chair.
Well, I also think okay, I'm going to try and be kind. There is a very real
spicy.
No, I will. Trust me, it'll get there. I'm just going to start off kind and we'll get to the right spot. Anyway, there is a reality that Dean's talking about in terms of like working at an MSP, right? I also hear a lot of no one else is doing anything. And I'm not hearing a lot of accountability either, right? So like I think a lot of times, and it's not on this person to do this, but I also think that either you go, this is for me, and I do like learning all these different things, and I'm going to help make it better, or you leave. Like, I don't know that you need to make it that the MSP is shitty. Now, I will say this sounds like a shitty MSP. If you don't have anything documented, whatever. But like, I also think that we can be the way we want to be in this world. And there's a lot of times where, I can tell pretty quick that someone's not going to work out because they're like, I want everything on a silver platter. And that is not the reality of how an MSP works. Either you get in, you hop into the mud and you get in there with making things better, or you do need to go to internal where they're going to give you everything and you're not going to have to worry as much about, defining your world and whatever. There's like pros and cons to both. But it does sound to me like this person maybe isn't made for this industry. I do agree though. I don't pay any of my technicians a salary. They're all paid hourly. I want them accurately compensated for the time that they spend. And when they get close to being at their overtime allotment, they're not allowed to work anymore. We move it to someone else. So we're technically exempt from some of those laws in where I'm in Canada, but we don't really care because just being exempt doesn't mean that that's the way you want to go about things. But I don't want to burn my technicians out. But it sounds to me like before we've even reached the burnout stage, they're just looking around going, nobody's giving me the answer and I don't like that. And that's not something that I also want to condone because that's not what this industry is about.
Well, I mean, to bring it back to kitchen, I was formulating this thought, I was reading it, is, hey, I, worked in, maybe some scratch kitchens or whatever, but I'm going to go work at Dean's Bar now, Dean's Bar and Grill. And I come into Dean's Bar and Grill and I am just thrown in the kitchen. And I'm like, this guy wants a burger, but I don't know where the hell these ingredients are. So I go and I try to find Dean and he's like, I don't know. It could be in dry storage over there. And then I go ask the other person who's just standing around and it's like, well, what do you do? And he's like, I just pour the beer. Meanwhile, I have to try to figure out where everything is in the kitchen, make everything. I have to do the dishes and I have like, you probably wouldn't stay there, but not all bars are like Dean's Bar, right? I could go to Amanda's bar and now there's recipe books, right? There's clearly defined roles. We have a dishwasher, we have a bartender, we have an expo and all of this, right? So just like Amanda and Dean's Bar are different, MSPs can be vastly different. Not all of them are going to be like Dean's Bar. And it, like Amanda said, it's up to you. Maybe you strive in that environment in Dean's Bar where you just kind of fly by the seat of your pants and you learn everything. It could be a great resume builder because if you work in Amanda's bar, well, you might not get any experience washing dishes. You might not get any experience pouring beer or having to do that stuff. We're in Dean's
You don't
Bar,
get to touch a Sophos until you've done training. Like,
exactly.
like
and for better or worse, like there are, as weird as it sounds, pros and cons to both. It's just kind of the preference, right? And maybe you try to take on the accountability and turns Dean's Bar into more of Amanda's bar. But let's get into the new story here. So let's say I'm the employee and I take it upon myself to try to turn around Dean's Bar and make it more make it better. And Dean sees that I'm doing hard work and he gives me a raise. So instead of 40K, I'm now making 55K. But I've been at that wage for 3 years. This is our new story, by the way, and you can pull it up. But anyway, the thing is, though, I start tracking my time and I've noticed that my output is, some people pay a little bit more, but my output is considerably more than I make. So I've, logged 20 hours, my company's invoice 3K, and I get that Dean needs to make money and profit off my time. But at some point I'm closing high value tickets and supporting it. And I don't feel that I'm being compensated fairly. So, should I go to Dean and say, hey, I need my comp raise to, 85, or I'm going to start looking elsewhere? What would you tell this person?
These are the posts on. I spent a lot of time on our MSP. These are the posts that really piss me off.
Yeah.
And they piss me off because they are written from a position of assumed knowledge and correctness. It's always an employee writing from a position of, I already know how this works and I'm right. And in this case, this person is factually incorrect and their math as presented is wrong. And they have developed an emotional opinion based on incorrect math. And that's really all of that is to say, because the premise was, how do I approach this negotiation? You cannot approach a salary negotiation with opinions and emotion. You cannot approach it with an opinion that something is inherently fair or unfair. And in this case, like a 55K a year salary the employee is seeing is not their actual cost to the company. Company pays them benefits, pays into taxes, other things. They have what's called a burden rate, which, not knowing where they live, is maybe like 1.2. So their actual cost to the company is $66,000 a year. And then in the services industry, any services industry, we tend to do a loaded W-2 multiplier. So that's 66K times 3 should be about $198 an hour. They would need to average bill at for the company to even be sure they're breaking even overall. Because guess what? There's more than you at the company, employee. And all of that, I don't expect every employee to know how the business works, but ignorance of the rules of the game you're playing doesn't insulate you from them. And a lot of employees don't know how any of this works. They've seen a couple TV shows, they've been on the internet, and they think restaurants are a great example of this. They see the owner maybe has a nice car or a nice house, and they're like, well, it's a $1 million MSP, so the owner's a millionaire. No, they're not. They pay themselves $80,000 a year. It's not a get rich quick industry. And knowing all of that allows you to have a lot more nuance. This person said they're only putting in like 25 billable hours a week. I'm losing money by employing them at $55,000 a year. I bet they don't even know that. So when they come into my office to have this conversation, I'm probably going to show them the door. And now they're going to have no job. And who wants that? So I hate these posts.
I'm in the same camp, Dean. I'm sitting here like nodding my head very vehemently because it's the same kind of. How much swearing is allowed on this again? I never remember.
All of it.
Okay.
The
This is the same
it's
kind
a
of
live
bullshit
stream.
math that clients do when they go, look, we've put in 15 tickets this month, and because we put in 15 tickets and we paid you, $5,000, that's this much per ticket. That's bullshit. That's guerrilla math. It is not actual sound business math. It is not. If you're not a business owner, if you've not taken a class to do it, maybe don't do that. Get curious, ask questions. That's totally fair. To turn around and just make assumptions is the part that pisses me off. And also, I have another fun question for you. So what happens when you don't get enough billables, right? You still get your salary. The owner doesn't necessarily get the money either. When you lose a contract and then all of a sudden now you're out the MRR, the owner has to deal with that. So that extra money doesn't just go into a fund bank account. It goes into, provided they're a good business owner, let's be real, there are some people that aren't, it goes into a slush fund to make sure that your ass is not fired. So like maybe put that into context as well. Are you happy at work? Do they take care of you? I've had quite a few technicians that I end up being like friends with in the industry, and they'll come to me and they say, I really want to make more money and I want to have that conversation. I'm like, have the conversation, but go in with humility, be curious, ask questions. That's not humility what we're seeing in the post. That is I know exactly what Dean said. I know that this is what they're doing and they're just, making all this money off me. 20 billable hours and you'd probably be on probation, to be honest with you, because that is not enough in a week. A week has 40 hours that's possible billable. You should have a minimum of 7 each day. I'm going to breathe.
So I can tell, I think I've told this story before, but when I was in this position, I mean, there was some emotional attached to it. So at one of my previous MSPs, I was wearing like 4 different hats. I have high level certification. My title was just an engineer, but I was doing project manager, project support, plus all like the like day-to-day tickets, pre-sales engineer, like the whole 9 yards. And being as I came from being a GM of the restaurant, I understood the business side of overhead, insurance, cost of goods, and all of this. So when it came time for me to negotiate this, because I was basically, hey, I know I'm paid a decent salary, but like what I'm doing and what I'm worth is more. So in my negotiation, I basically put, hey, this is my title and this is what is expected of me per the job, description that I signed. This is what I'm doing. I'm doing these 4 job descriptions. I looked up average salary ranges for those. I'm certified in doing those. I've proven excellence that not only am I doing them, I am extremely capable of them, producing X amount of revenue, which covers cost of good, burden rate, overhead, and all of that being said, based off of statistical, factual numbers that I was able to pull from our PSA, this is what I feel would be a fair compensation for myself. And basically said, I want to grow with this company and everything. Like, I would like to have this conversation. Like Dean said, you can't go into it with emotion. I was emotionally charged because I'm like, this is bullshit. I need more. But I came to it with, here's the
That's the
facts
mix, right?
that are very hard to refute. And I think as well going into it is, if you're going to bring all of that, you do have to be prepared to either be told no, or like at that point, like, hey, I'm going to look elsewhere. So, both of you being in those positions, like, would you say that would be an acceptable, better way to go at? Is there any holes you can poke into what I did?
It is
I
a
mean,
better way.
Which one you want to go, Dean?
Well, I was just going to say it is a better way, but you started off with a really important phrase that too many employees, and I've always been an employee, have a problem with. You said, I'm worth more. And no, you're not. So from a like personal value in society, absolutely. But in business, no, you're not. This isn't an art dealership. We it's not a tax shelter where we arbitrarily assign value to something based off our opinion. You're worth what someone will pay you. And the fact of the matter is, even if that same role in your industry gets paid more, you are not worth more until someone will pay you that rate. And so you have to be prepared. All this is to say, you have to be prepared in this conversation that you will not get what you want. And your only option to get your worth may be to try to find another job. And a lot of folks, that takes the first 2 or 3 times that's happened to them for them to kind of wake up to that fact and realize that, like, oh, okay, so my worth is also tied to my ability to command that salary in actuality. And we don't tell, especially younger people in the industry, we don't tell them that part enough, because we want people to have personal respect and place a value on themselves as a human. And we confuse that language a lot with their value as basically a commodity at a business, which are not entirely the same, as unfair as that sounds. So if you are an employee and you're hearing this, just remember that your worth is tied to what someone will actually pay you. Even if what you are being paid is below market rate or is unfair, or like Josh laid out, is almost empirically wrong compared to the facts. If no one will pay you what you think you should be paid, then you're not worth that. And that's a really, really hard thing to understand.
I'm a big fan of, if you are in that position where maybe it's a case of, whether it be because the market can't bear, whatever the cost is for your salary in the area that you're working in, or whatever the reason is. I'm a big fan, and I give a lot of advice about talking to technicians talking to their bosses about getting bonuses based on percentages that they're able to contribute, so that it's directly tied back to, something that's measurable, that they can predict, and that they have control over. For example, if you're an automation engineer, you could negotiate a bonus based on how much time you save the company. That's something that you're putting money back in their pocket. It's a very easy part of the conversation to have, right? And then it's not necessarily about your value as a person. It's your skill set being used to save money for the company, and then, negotiating from there. I just want to somebody had a question in the comments about like if they're a dumb MSP owner for sharing financials. I actually don't think that you are. However, I do think
They're
that
very
you
smart.
can't share that without the education that goes along with it, without talking about things like burden rates. And I don't know what the W-2 thing is. We have a different word for it here in Canada, but like nonetheless, when you talk about all the costs that go into it, and make some of those bear as well, because like there's the cost of the software that you use to deliver the service to the clients, but there's also the ones that you have that for your staff to use, and that also has to be a part of it. Like those things are things that they don't really think about. They kind of check out of that, and I think that's an important part of the conversation. Share that information, but don't share it just willy-nilly. That could be actually really damaging. You need to give people the tools, if they've never looked at something like that, to be able to understand what they're looking at.
I would also just say, kind of to tee off what Amanda said, if you do have employees that perform the way Josh was sort of painting himself, I think part of being a good business owner is actually helping somebody sort of right size and normalize that self-valuation statement. If Josh said, I'm worth more, if I have an employee that is worth more, how do I have that conversation with them where I teach them what they need to do to be able to actually command that salary, even if the risk is it won't be with me? How do I say to Josh, you know what, you're right, and I know that, but your LinkedIn or your resume actually doesn't reflect any of that. Do you want to spend some time with me and build that out so that your public persona reflects the value that you bring to this company? There's some training I could get you invested in, that would teach you a little bit more about this part of the business, so you could actually really claim that you could do that title properly. Yes, it is possible that employee may eventually leave your company for another job for more money, but that's how you communicate to that employee that you agree with them, that they are worth more, even if you can't match what their salary ask is. And loyalty isn't a currency in business you should count on, but that is how you build loyalty in your organization. It's how you build trust.
But the loyalty isn't even just the only thing. We've had people who's been in that position before too, Dean, who've moved on to other positions, but then they will send people that they know that are new in the industry who are, saying, well, I don't know where to work. Where should I go to learn? They'll send them to us because they're like, that's a good place to go.
How proud are you of those people?
Yeah, I mean, it's karma. I've had
Right?
people who interviewed and didn't take the job still send people to us. So, like, I feel like what you put out there, it's intentional and it creates the space that you want for your business. And, like, whether it works out or not, that's kind of what we're saying, too, when we're saying don't come with an attitude of entitlement to that conversation. Come with curiosity and investment in both yourself and where the company's going, because it's reciprocal. The whole thing is reciprocal, and it needs to be. And if it's not, then maybe you shouldn't stay, because then that conversation will never go beyond, the churn of we see you as a dollars for time, right?
Yep. All right, let's I think we have time for one more story, so this will be dealer's choice. These stories are: client asks for VCTO or partial CTO, or experience with raffles at trade shows. Which would you like to go down?
Probably raffles at trade shows for me, but I don't know how Dean feels about a marketing question.
I mean, I answered the raffles at trade shows post on Reddit, so I'm fine with either one.
Ooh, all right. Well, we'll go with Amanda. Let's go raffles at trade shows, because I think it's an interesting topic that we haven't covered yet on Community Live. So we're going to go with experience at raffles at trade shows. Hello, I'm with an MSP that is starting to get into trade shows. We've done one this year, and predictably, we were way underprepared. We have another one coming up and are planning to do a raffle, but we're having a bit of back and forth internally as far as what our stipulations should be in order for attendees to enter it. Those in sales want the prereqs to be entering it for the person to be a decision maker and for them to book a discovery call with us in order to get their name in the raffle. This would ensure more FTA with qualified leads, but I want the raffle to be open to anybody who subscribes to our weekly blog. The thinking here being that booking an appointment on the spot is too big of an ask, and the point of the raffle is to draw in as many people to the booth as possible and get good mailing lists for email outreach. Any other MSPs have experience with that sort of thing? What worked best for you? So, Amanda, since you wanted to cover this, as an MSP, do you guys do any trade shows where you are the vendor at them? How would you handle this raffle?
I don't know why it can't be both. I don't know why you have to decide. I don't know why you can't say, if you sign up for the newsletter, you get one ballot. If you sign, you do the other thing, you get a ballot. Like, I feel like you can multi-layer it. I don't know that it has to be warring sides. If the goal and the point is to have eyes, then the more touch points that you create, the better, in my opinion.
So I want to throw something out here because the three of us have been to trade shows. Have any of us closed a deal or chosen somebody because we won a pair of sweet headphones in a raffle?
Absolutely.
Does it actually matter?
One
Okay, all right.
time.
I stand corrected.
Can I tell you why, though? It's not what you think. And this is why I think this question is important. It's not what you think. So I will leave the vendor name out of it. But there is a vendor where I won the headphones. And through winning the headphones, I stayed at the booth to have a really long conversation with one of the vendors. And that person has, like, one of the workers for the vendor. And that person has since moved on to 2 different companies. Now, she already had my business for the first one when I got the earphones. That's probably not the best thing, but nonetheless. But when she moved on to the other companies, there was an implicit trust because she was there and I had formed that relationship with her. I think when we talk about whether the sale happens at the booth, when we talk about when it happens in general, it doesn't really matter. It's the what are you building over time? Some people need more than one touch point, more than one conversation. And anytime you're doing something, it isn't really that, oh, these people gave me this thing. It's through the process of that, I had a chance to interact with them and see how they operate.
This in this particular case, it's an MSP. So it's vendors have the same problem, just for everybody. They have the same debates internally, but vendors a little easier because usually MSPs are going to an MSP trade show often with a primary or secondary goal of evaluating MSP focused products and services. At a trade show that an MSP is exhibiting at, that often is not the case. Even if you're going to a verticalized trade show for your industry, like maybe it's a restaurant trade show, that's going to be a specific to that industry, and everybody going there is not going there because they necessarily want to buy a new product or service for their restaurant. And MSPs also have a longer sales cycle, typically more conversational. So really the goal of this is to get better quality leads that I can set a consultative appointment with. Probably not going to close me at the booth, so to speak. And so I think the easiest thing to think about here is, what is your current cost of acquisition for a client? And that's why most people struggle with this, because they don't know. And at an MSP, it's a lot. I guarantee you it's a lot of money. And you're probably spending thousands of dollars if you look at overall the SG&A and the labor that goes into acquiring a new customer. And that's where most people screw up this raffle question, because we think like a $300 pair of AirPods is a lot of money once. But like, imagine like if I could tell you like, hey, Josh, pay me $300 and I will have a prospect qualified in your ICP, like, set an appointment with you today, you'd be like, fuck yeah. Like, here's okay, cool. Yeah. So you kind of got to think of it like that, but then you have to realize that a lot of people, if you want list expansion, a lot of people at that show are not your ICP, are not, at that restaurant show. If Josh is there as an assistant manager, he probably doesn't have any buying power. So he's probably just walking around to see cool stuff and is going to go back and tell his bosses about all the vendors he saw. So like Amanda said before, do both. Have a low barrier option, like a business card bowl on the table. Just drop your card and don't have to talk to me, and we'll pull 3 out and they'll get a $10 Amazon card. And then have a higher value item that you do gate around someone who is worth your time, is going to book that appointment, and make that higher value item worthwhile. Don't be cheap here, because when you think about the total cost of acquiring that client, even a $500 and $800 item is probably still cheaper than months of marketing and meeting and everything else.
Well, you have to think too.
And bear in mind, you're going to do it wrong the first time.
You have to think too, what's the cost isn't just like what you're saying too. Like, every MSP has a different approach. Most MSPs, it's just the owner doing sales. So they get in their head like there's no cost, but taking an owner out of, anything that drives the business forward is very different. But like our MSP, we actually have a salesperson. We have an SDR. We have a marketing person. There's some real overhead. So it better be worth it. But in the sense that, they're hustling constantly, and we have to be monitoring whether or not we're getting the bang for the buck out of that. And sometimes it comes in a little bit, and sometimes it comes in huge bits. So like looking at this one micro campaign, this one micro whatever, and going, yes, if this doesn't work, then we'll never do it again. That's also silly. I just want to make sure to say that.
And it probably won't work right the first one or two times.
It takes time. Marketing takes time.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever well, of course, you like getting cool stuff. I mean, would you enter a raffle for a vendor you have zero interest in ever doing any business for?
Sure. The worst part about moving over to the vendor side is I stopped being able to do that. Do you know how much nonsense I own? Because I would walk around a trade show floor being like, who had like, I'll pick on Avik only because Amanda has it in her tagline. Avik tends to give away really cool Legos. I love Legos. I have been happy when I was an MSP for years with our network monitoring and management tool. Nothing against Avik. It's a great product. I knew for a fact I wasn't going to buy from them, and I still entered the raffle and would politely take the calls afterwards from their SDRs. I want the freaking Legos. Like, heck yeah, I want to win. So it can work, especially if you align your prize or your gift to be something interesting, something I would not probably not going to normally go buy myself like a $400 Lego set, but winning one at a show. So
yeah,
it worked.
But I think though too, it's still like valuable because you might be happy now, but if you've entered that, you build that relationship, they keep the relationship respectful. If something does happen, I mean, over time, if you're evaluating your stack or the one you're using gets bought by a larger vendor that you don't like, well, I'm assuming your first call would then be to Avik, because you've built that relationship. So.
Funny story about that. So years ago, before they were giving away the Legos, I won, I forget what it was. I won something from Avik, and that caused me to, like Amanda said, talk to them a little bit. And so we were a lab tech shop at our MSP, and I used the lab tech network probe for everything. And I had it really dialed in. I had my own MIB files and everything. I objectively did not need a tool like Avik. And what I did end up doing, though, was when we bought a totally different product, LionGuard, you had to punch through their inspectors early on through your network, and they didn't have any guides. Avik did. And I knew that. And so I started using the Avik KB to train my team how to punch stuff through the network, which meant that my entire team ended up having this viewpoint that Avik was the de facto standard in how to configure network gear. And even though by the time we needed a tool like that, I think we were using PRTG because my former MSP thinks everybody buys off the Gartner Magic Quadrant. But the point was, like, a lot of our employees they knew this brand, and they knew this brand as being a subject matter expert. And so to Amanda's point, it's in the future, if we were going to crowdsource what's our next tool, probably 9 out of 10 hands in the room would be like, what about Avik? That's not going to help an MSP today or in the next year close a deal. So, the MSP in question, don't pin all your hopes and dreams that in the next 10 years someone will buy from you. But it could result in a soft referral.
Yeah, hold on. We actually just got a client that has been in our cycle for 10 years.
Yeah,
so
yeah. We do that, Dean. We've had that where, because we put a newsletter out, we'll send somebody a newsletter literally 6, 7, 8 years, and then all of a sudden they'll raise their hand, and it's because someone changed, or even we've had people move on to other companies, and then all of a sudden, because they got the newsletter in their capacity with the company that we had on our radar, they'll come find us. That's why I said before that both is important. Having that drip, that like presence that's more about brand awareness and setting you up as the expert is important. And then you go for the one that's like, I want to close this deal right now. It's more intentional. You need to have both. I just want to say something to the person in the comments who's angling for a job. I do have open positions right now, but unless you're in Ontario and you're able to go to our office, we don't hire remotely. So I'm so sorry. Unless you're in that area, then feel free to apply. B4 Networks.
Great hustle. Yeah, great hustle.
I also have open tech roles, but again, you have to be in the San Diego. For these particular roles, we don't hire remotely. Some of them we do, but currently the ones we need are in the San Diego area. So if you're in that area, come check us out at centrixit.com. So all that being said, unfortunately, it is time, which sucks because I could spend the next 8 hours plus with you two. Thank you so much for coming on. I agree. I love you both. Thank you for coming on. Anything you guys want to plug really quick in the next 15 seconds? And then
I want to plug Josh. Josh is speaking at IT Nation Connect this year, arguably the largest and oldest big convention for MSPs, and he is a main stage. Well, not like keynote main stage, but like a main stage presenter, which is really hard. They have hundreds, like 800 people apply every year, and they can pick 60, and they pick Josh. Go see Josh speak. So proud of you, buddy.
Thank you.
Me too. I'm just going to say I'm going to be in the booth for the first time at MSP Summit for Avix. So if y'all are going to that at all, come by and say hi.
Woo!
Awesome.
Welcome to the dark side.
Perfect. Thank you.
Halfway. One foot in both.
All right. You guys have a fantastic day. Thank you.
This has been a broadcast